welcome back to my channel. I am doing a very different technique than I normally do. I usually do a whole lot of stenciling if you've been to my channel before, but today we are going to try out some no-line watercoloring. So just a full disclosure, I am not a pro at this. I've practiced this very rarely. So I do a variety of things in this video, just trying to kind of test some things out and just practice a technique that is not super familiar to me. So what I have is some Bristol Smooth cardstock here. That is what I have found works the best with these Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers, and I have just a variety of them in a tin. I have a Hero Arts Togetherness Bouquet floral stamp here, and I am using Ink on 3 Fade Out ink. This is a good waterproof, no-line coloring ink. I have seen people that are much more experienced than myself use not only this ink, but also distress ink in antique linen. You just want an ink color that is waterproof, but is very, very pale. What's nice about this particular one is it is going to take on the color of whatever you put over it. So it's not like it's black. It's not as stark as a black, and it's not invisible either. So it just takes on a slightly different hue of whatever color you put over it. Again, it is very hard to see on camera. I can see it better in real life. I do end up zooming this in a little bit. This is an entire sheet of that Bristol Smooth cardstock. I just didn't have a scrap that was big enough for this particular image. So here I have zoomed in, and I am using May Green and Deep Green. This is from, like I said, the Zig Clean Color line. And because this is not a super familiar technique to myself, the easiest thing I started with for me was the greenery. I knew I wanted to have at least 3 different colors of greenery. This greenery is spread in kind of a visual triangle, so that made it easy for me to have 3 different kind of shades or hues of green and spread them out somewhat evenly throughout this entire image. So what I have here is, this is dry, and I took the dark green where I wanted it to be the darkest, and I took the lighter green where I wanted it to be the lightest. And I have a water brush pen. I purchased this off of Amazon, I believe, many, many moons ago. And I am just using just a little bit of that water that comes out of that tip to kind of blend this together. This is real time. Like I said, this is not a fast technique for me. This is not a familiar and well-practiced technique by me. There are others that this may be the quickest way that they know how to color, but that is because they've practiced it and perfected it. They know what methods they like to use as far as applying the color. They know what colors they like and what combinations they like. That is not me. So, like I said, I took a long time to do this. I had an hour's worth of footage, but it took me probably an hour and maybe 20 minutes to complete this entire card, which I guess for some is not super terribly long, but for me that is pretty long. So I am just trying to apply this kind of darker and lighter combination in 3 different areas around this composition, and trying to find out where leaves and stems may be, so that I try not to color in a petal of a flower, thinking it is greenery. So, and I may have done that just unbeknownst to myself. So I do try to leave just a little bit of a gap in between the dark and the light, just so that there is a place for them to blend. I was just, like I said, trying out some different things. That may not be what works for you. You may want to, and I actually end up doing that in this video, where I end up blending all of these colors with the lightest. I do one where I just use one color and blend it out with the water brush. I encourage you to play. That's what I did in this video. When you are practicing something or using a medium or a technique that is not super familiar to you, you're not very comfortable with it, I do encourage you to play. try different ways of applying it. Go on YouTube, go on Pinterest, go on the manufacturer's website and see how other people have applied it. See how other people have used it and implemented it, and see what techniques you think would work best for you, and then try them. Do it with no intent to necessarily make something for somebody or to put it on display or use it in any way, shape, or form. Just do it so that you can become a little bit more familiar with that particular technique, whatever it may be. So that is my tip for the day, or crafting according to Brandy. So as you can see, I've rapidly sped up this video. Like I said, this took me a little over an hour to color, which is very long for me. I usually don't spend that amount of time on a card, but this is actually going to be my mother's birthday card, so she is definitely worth it. However, you would probably be having gray hairs and super bored by the time this was done, so I decided to rapidly speed it up. Again, I am just spreading out the colors into like a visual triangle. I wanted a lot of variation in the colors, and so as far as the greenery went, and so I did try to spread those out a little bit, just so there was more interest. For these little rounder looking leaves, I guess you could call them a berry or a bud if you wanted to. You could color them that way, but I colored them as more greenery. I did put like a dark green and like almost a turquoisey green, and then I put that bright green in there, and I really liked how that worked. If you notice on this one, I actually like used the lighter color to blend in with the darker, and then I went back over that with the water brush pen. That is just another way to blend these colors together to get a different look. That is another technique for you to try, see if it works but good for you, if you like it, if you don't, if you like how it turns out. This is a good image to play with in the sense that it is big enough that you can play, but it is small enough that you're not overwhelmed. And I won't lie to you, when I started on the flowers, I was starting to get a little overwhelmed. Again, this is not a technique that I do very often because it is so time consuming. And so I almost took a break for a minute, um, but I decided I was going to go ahead and just power through. So I have quite a few colors here that I'm using, and I will put them all in the video description. Um, I think when I purchased these markers, I've had these markers for a very long time, y'all, like a very long time. Probably 5 or 6 years. I've never had to replace them. Again, I don't use them very often, but I've never had one dry out. I've never had to replace one. One of the things that I really, really like about this is that the tip on this is super, super fine. So if you struggle with, larger markers or whatnot, this is a good option. The nib is like a brush, but it is super fine and it can get into really tiny areas, and it's pretty flexible too. So it's good for me as someone that's learning, someone that wants to practice. There are tons and tons of colors. I purchased this set a long time ago, like I said, and I'm sure there are lots more colors out on the market now, um, but I don't use this medium enough to justify spending money on more of them, if that makes sense. Um, I would more than likely spend money on inks and stamp sets than I would on watercolor brushes like this. With that being said, there are lots of these kinds on the market. Altenew has some. There are Karen brush marker pros. I think those are their watercolor ones. Um, Different nibs, different colors, um, but all with the same idea in mind. I do know that the Altenew ones are refillable. I do not know about the Karen brush markers being refillable. These are not refillable. You would have to just buy another marker, but they are sold individually and in packs. I bought mine in a pack just because I have this thing called full set syndrome, meaning I have to have all of the things and all of the colors, and it's a problem. It's a problem, people. Uh, but like I said, these have enough colors, enough like neutrals and also bright colors and even some like desaturated colors that I don't feel the need to get more. So I did that. I'm not sure what kind of, I know I'm coloring a rose right now. But that orange flower, I really like how that turned out. Again, I used kind of a orange and then like a yellow as the lighter color, and I really like how that turned out. I was trying to tap into my inner Kelly Lottavola. She loves a lot of color variation, and I love how hers always turn out. And so I was trying to kind of mimic that a little bit. I'm not sure how successful I was, but in the end, I was happy with how these turned out. Those little tiny white, they look like mini daisies to me. Uh, I did want those to be white, and how I accomplished that was with a very pale gray color. In fact, I think it is called pale gray. Um, and that's how I accomplished that. They didn't look white when there was nothing else around them. They looked gray. But now once we have more color around them, they actually do appear white, but with some detail and some shading. So I was happy with how those turned out. This rose, we are going to end up revisiting that rose in a little bit, but now I've moved on to, I think this is a magnolia. It looks like a magnolia to me. Um, I just outlined this whole thing in the dark marker, and then I'm taking that water brush and just kind of uh, bleeding or moving that color around. In the end, I didn't like the depth I had. I felt like it looked very flat. And so I did end up trying to go back and add some more depth in there. I ended up grabbing the wrong marker, which is okay. That's okay. I did end up grabbing the wrong marker, but I did go back several times just trying to kind of work that a little bit to get more depth to it. For these flower centers, I took one of the orangey colors. This is where I grabbed the wrong marker. So I just was working with it. For those flower centers, I did take like an orange marker and then dot in a brown marker just to give it some more interest and texture. I do end up going back into these flower centers with a white gel pen and with a black like fine tip pen. Here we're revisiting that rose. It just had like no depth at all. It looked so flat and so boring. And so I end up actually overworking this. The paper actually starts to pill. This is not a straight, like a watercolor paper, but it is the paper that works the best with these markers to get these colors to move. This is Bristol Smooth cardstock. So it has almost like it's very smooth, and it has like almost like a coating on it. I ended up trying to add like a very dark red. I think I added like wine red to it, and that gave me some more depth. But like I said, the paper started to pill, so I just had to leave it alone. I just had to leave it alone. Otherwise, I was going to ruin the whole composition, and I was not starting over. So, moving on. I felt like this lent itself to a square card. And what I had in mind was a square card. So I took a 5 by 10 piece of cream colored cardstock, folded it in half long ways. So that now I have a 5 by 5 folded piece, folded card base. And I am taking that same Hero Arts Togetherness Bouquet, and I am stamping it in limestone ink just randomly all around this card base. This is going to give me some interest to the background, but not compete with the florals. So I'm just going to randomly stamp that all the way around. It doesn't matter if the stamp overlaps in the center, because the flower is going to go, the watercolored flower is going to go in the middle. So I'm just going to use my stamping positioning tool to make sure that I get a good impression. Just because this is a larger image and I didn't have an acrylic block that was large enough to hold this. Otherwise, I probably would have used an acrylic block just because it would have been faster. So now I'm going to just kind of zap my flowers with my heat gun. That rose in particular that I overworked was still really wet, and I was going to have to fussy cut this out because I don't have, nor do I know if there's a coordinating die. So I have some kind of fine tip scissors from Tim Holtz here. I did cut this off of the larger sheet that it came on, and I'm just going to fussy cut this. The easiest way to fussy cut is to actually move your paper, keep your scissors steady, and just move your paper. And I eventually start to do that. That is just the easiest way to get a smooth fussy cut and not tear or bend your composition that you're working on, or the image that you're trying to fussy cut. So I did zap this to dry it just to make sure that I wouldn't have any tearing, because if you see I've got this yellow random spot, I dropped the marker or the cap or something. And I wasn't worried about that because I knew I was going to end up fussy cutting this out. So again, just keep your scissors straight in your dominant hand and then move the paper around with your non-dominant hand. That is the easiest way to fussy cut. And I am not big into fussy cutting. I don't enjoy it at all. But again, this is for my mom, so she is worth doing some things that are not necessarily fun for me. So here I'm just kind of trying to plan out where I want the sentiment to go and where the flower is going to go in relation to that sentiment. So I'm going to grab this same Hero Arts Togetherness bouquet, and I'm going to use the happy birthday that's in there. I thought it was a good scripty font that would look nice with this particular card. So here is that black fine tip pen. This is a 0.5 from Paper Studio, and I'm just going to dot the centers of these flowers with that and with the Sakura Jelly Roll 8.08 pen. There are lots of, I just felt like these centers needed something. I felt like they were kind of meh. And so I again tapped into my inner Kelly Lotovola and decided to kind of bring them to life this way. I've had this Jelly Roll pen for a very long time. There are Jelly Roll pens, white opaque pens on the market now that probably work better than this. I just don't have them. This works okay for me. Again, it's not something that I have found the need to buy or invest more in. But there are some that are super, super white. This, particularly on the pink flower, the rose, again, that I overworked terribly, I feel like it almost fades to a pink. It's still fairly white, but I feel like there's some pink in there then. After I did that, I went through and added some random highlights to some of these flowers. I wasn't being particular on a light source or anything like that. I just added them where I thought they looked nice. So there is that, all colored. It is all done. I don't do anything else to it. And I am pretty happy with how that turned out. That took me some time, but I was happy with how that turned out. So I brought back my stamping positioning tool. I placed my flower where I wanted it to go, and then I put my sentiment in there, and I'm going to actually gold heat emboss this. I have Ranger gold embossing powder. I did use Versamark ink to stamp this. I stamped it twice. I did treat the paper with my anti-static powder tool just to ensure that I had a more crisp embossed image. And then I will heat set this with my heat gun. Now that our image is heat embossed, our sentiment is heat embossed, I did add some instant dimension foam tape from Altenew to the back of that floral just to give it a little more pop from the background. And then the card is done. We are going to add some embellishments, but I don't have any square envelopes. They're just not something that I find readily where I live. So I have a 5x7 envelope. So this would fit a 5x7 card. And I'm just going to actually cut this down. I learned this from Jennifer McGuire. She quite often, when she makes a card that is not like a typical or average size, she will cut down an envelope and make it fit. So I am cutting off, I think I end up cutting off like 3/4 of an inch from each side. And then I'm going to show you how we seal this back up. So once you have your envelope cut down to the size that you need it, all I did was I opened it up, and the envelope flap that has the lickable portion is at the top. And all I did was put glue, a very thin line of liquid glue, just because I knew that would hold better. Particularly if you're going to mail this, I would recommend using a liquid glue. You don't need a lot, but I felt like a liquid glue would give me a stronger hold. And just put a thin line of it and then seal it back up. And then you have a custom-made envelope using one from your stash. So in order to kind of jazz up this envelope, again, this is, for my mom, so she deserves something a little special, and her favorite color is red. So I put this envelope back into my stamp positioning tool, and I'm just going to stamp that same floral image in the bottom left corner, just to give this envelope a little more interest, and that is beautiful in itself. I used cherry ink from Simon Says Stamp, and that is beautiful. So to finish off this card, I went through my little stash and I pulled out some pearls from Blingee Thingee off of Etsy, and I just put those kind of around the card. They have like an almost like an iridescent finish with like a brown gold undertone. They are really pretty. And I felt like that iridescent finish pulled the colors from the flowers really nicely. So after I get these in place, this card is complete. I want to thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you felt inspired, and I hope that you get to send someone you love a paper hug soon. Until then, we will see you next time. Bye.